Sidhu Saab, Dr. Dhingra, Dr. Vaidya, Dr. S.K. Sharma, faculty members, Dr. Shabra, Dr. Anuradha Thakur, Dr. Richa Sharma, and other distinguished speakers. GGDSC College Society, formed 47 years back, started its journey from a 2-canal Bangalore in Sector 9. And from there, it has, over a period of time, progressed into four colleges, 2 public schools, and now PML Business School. 2 years back, we thought about starting the business school, and we went through a process of learning how to run a business school. Dear students, let me tell you that after a careful thought, we are benchmarking ourselves the best in the country. And we welcome you to this institute, and we promise that we will fulfill your dreams. The process of learning, practicing, and innovation with the experiential learning is going to be hallmark for your future. And from personal experience, I will say this, that what you do during these 2 years is going to decide your professional future for times to come. From personal experience, I will tell you that I did my engineering from PEC, joined a multinational company, did my MBA during the evening time in Madras University. But very many times in my professional career, I found that somewhere I should have done better in my academic institute. So if during this period we put our best, you will get the best in your life later on. So with this, I wish you good luck and good learning process, hard work during these 2 years, which should be 24/7 learning and practicing what you learn. That will go a long way in your career. I wish you good luck. All the
First of all, I must thank the chairman of the College Society, the members of the Board of Governors, and above all, the director of the Institute, Dr. Dhingra, for having afforded me the opportunity to be interacting with the young friends. When Dr. Dhingra approached me the other day, frankly speaking, I was a little diffident because coming from the 1984 batch of the Indian Administrative Service, and to be addressing students who arguably are among the brightest minds and in this millennium to lead the cutting edge corporate sectors, I was a little hesitant whether I would be able to add any value to what they require or what they need or the type of guidance that they may require. But Dr. Dhingra, of course, was very persuasive. His brief CV, which has been told, really does not reflect his potential and also his energy. Working in public sector undertaking is not a simple task, and turning around two is really a monumental piece of achievement, because you're interacting not only with the ministry, you're acting with independent directors, and then there is the Ministry of Industrial Development and so on, and Finance Ministry. So the type of independence, if I may say so, which a private sector CEO or a CMD would have, that is definitely not afforded in the private sector. And in spite of that, he has had huge achievements. Normally, my experience has been that public sector undertaking chief executives tends to be conservative in nature, tends to be in the nature of preserving a status quo, but he was a person who was always leading from front. Organizations like HUDCO and then Indian Telecom Industries, and then of course the Bankers Institute, which he headed for 3 years, I think, in Pune. A multidisciplinary experience. So I think you are lucky to have a director like him. Lucky also to be a part of an institution and a society which has such an enlightened chairman and board of governors. The worthy son of an illustrious father, Pandit Mohanlal ji, of course, was the founder president of the society. And from humble beginnings, as he has said, arguably, this is among the most prestigious of institutions dealing with commerce and management, and also such proactive members of the Board of Governors who actively involve themselves in taking the institute to the next levels, because it's about having a vision, shared values, as has been said, and not ending there, then the execution thereof. We have huge plans, PowerPoint presentations, spiral bound glossy papers, but at the end of the day, the execution and implementation thereof, that makes the difference. And the guiding light that the people who are deprived, people in the backward areas, they may not bypass this boon of education in spite of all the governmental efforts. So going back to the roots and working in places like Gurdaspur, and I had the opportunity a few years ago of actually driving down for one of the annual convocation of the girls' college, and I was really very happy to see the standard which the students had there. And speaking of the girls' college, Gurdaspur, I'm also happy to see lockdown here that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, majority of the students of this batch happen to be girl students or ladies, and that really speaks of the aspirational aspects, especially when we're talking in terms of gender differences and women empowerment. So I'm happy that this institution has been able to attract those bright students, especially the girl students. Now, I have been given approximately 1 hour, and I was talking to Dr. Dhigra as to what my talk should be. So approximately 2/3 of the time, I'm going to be talking about what management is, what leadership is, and management and leadership, of course, confined to the corporate environment in which you would be working, but it would equally apply to other situations of life because the principles are general. And whether you're going to have your own startup or working for a startup, working for a public sector undertaking, I think the general principles remain the same. And what you pick up here, what you pick up which you think relevant, which resonates with you, I think that is the art and science of education, because society as a large, the media, the social media, your friends, your family, your education institutions, whole lot of stuff is bombarded at you literally, and some of it can really become noise, if I may use the word. So it is really being tuned to those things which resonate with you, putting them past the filter which you think is going to be relevant, assimilating them, and then executing and implementing them in your own unique style. So that, I think, is the core and crux of management and leadership. When we speak in terms of corporate sectors, we include companies, and earlier in the 80s and the 90s, and also the public sector undertakings, thanks to Margaret Thatcher's initiatives in Great Britain of public management, and a whole lot of emphasis was kind of transferred to making profits, which euphemistically sometimes is described as enhancing the shareholder value, which means effectively ignoring other stakeholders, which a company, a corporate, big or small, ecosystem in which it kind of works. So for instance, if you are a company, but you're working in a backward tribal area doing coal mining or a steel plant, you cannot but be concerned about the people around you, whether they are your employees or not. Similarly, your own employees, it is not about cost cutting and hiring and firing which defines a company. It is like in this COVID scenario, there are companies which have, under no legal obligation, gone and paid the wages. So therefore, it is not only the shareholder value, but it is the value which you add to other stakeholders, including your clients and ultimately it is those which indirectly come back and feed into the top line and the bottom line, because
टैब मैं तो देख रहा हूँ ये जलता है.
can we have the mic muted? एक आध the mic shared the. Thank you. So friends, what I wanted to talk about at the moment was in terms of what a manager is and what a leader is. Let me be very clear that it is not my prescription or even the faintest suggestion, that managers and leaders are fundamentally different, or that being a leader is at a superior pedestal vis-a-vis being a manager. My personal view is that manager and leaders are a continuum, and every manager in every capacity is also in his or her right a leader. Like in army, they say whether you're commanding 5 people or whether you're commanding a platoon or whether you're commanding a unit as a full colonel or a divisional commander as a major general, a command is a command, and that is where your leadership qualities come. Management, of course, you would have a full 2 years lectures and discourses being instilled and distilled and constantly bombarded into you, is not a do-it-yourself affair. It is getting the organizational objectives implemented through a team under your control. So your job is pretty much set. The board of governors, the board of directors taking decisions. You have authority and resources. You've got staff under your control. The lines of control are not dotted and fuzzy lines. The people working under you are your employees. They're paid by the company. They are under your superintendent's direction and control. You can ask them, direct them to do what you want. You can restrain from acting in a way they might want to do. So therefore, those are the people who are really the employees, and there is a one-on-one correspondence between you, and the hierarchy and those organizational charts are the epitome of what a management structure is. Now, leadership is a more fuzzy type of a thing. When we talk in terms of leaders, the people are the followers. And generally we say leading from the front. I think it's an oxymoron, because a leader, by virtue of leading, is always supposed to be in the front. And the people who may be his followers, people who are sharing a value which they cherish, a common value, they follow him. One beautiful example attributed to an American president, I really forget his name, is that in case of management, it is like a spoke. You are pushing a person to act in a particular direction. Whereas in leader, it's like a delicate silk thread with which you are trying to pull. It's almost a magnetic, invisible pull. With a thread, you cannot poke a person to get into a particular direction. So generally speaking, leader, as distinct, is person who leads, and the people who are not his staff members, who are under no legal obligation to follow, yet would go above and beyond their call of duty. So where these two circles intersect and merge is that the leader, when he morphs into a manager, the people working under his control are willing to put in that extra bit, which goes beyond their 9 to 5 type of a strict contractual obligation. So therefore, manager and leader, this continuum, I'd talk a little bit. These are not mutually exclusive concepts. And someone said, managers are necessary, leaders are essential. So, which is almost a prerequisite, and other is like an icing on the cake. So therefore, every manager, when you start off, you can, without even a label a position or a post, exercise the leadership. Even today, as a student, you can exercise the leadership. There is nothing of leadership. Sometimes you find there is a fire alarm in a building, and it is not really a person who you think has been given the job of handling the rescue would be emerging in the leader. Maybe a small-time chowkidar may take the responsibility. So leadership sometimes has to be assumed, and every manager must necessarily have a tendency and must have a mental propensity and an openness of mind to grab leadership opportunities, because those are rare to come by, and whenever they come, you should not then flinch. But what is this leadership and management is all about? It is about a value that you cherish. It can be your organizational objectives. For instance, your SD colleges governing society feels that we must bring education to the backward areas of Gurdaspur district, or we must train our young students to be the best in the management curriculum, whether they want to go in for NGOs, not for profit, corporate sector, public sector, startups, or their own enterprises. So that is the vision that they have, a shared value which is not negotiable. So a leader like, for instance, Mahatma Gandhi, the shared value was independence from the Britishers. So the followers and the leaders have that shared value. Similarly, the manager and his staff members need to have the shared value. This is what our job is, and this is what we are going to do. We are not here to find excuses why it cannot be done. We are here to find ways and means of getting the things done. Often we talk in terms of jugaad, which is, I would say, a very underrated, if not pejorative type of a thing. It speaks of innovation. It speaks of getting things done without adequate resources, going in for something which is not specified under your SOP. So if you think that you can have an SOP for innovation, you know, some of the countries and some universities have standard operating procedures even for innovation. But innovation is that spark that sometimes you and your friend sharing a cup of coffee or tea in a coffee house can come up with something. And then, as I said, concepts, ideation, all very good. Ultimately, the implementation thereof, that is what is really going to, take you to the next level. So between leadership and management, I would like to just run through and rattle through what are, in my opinion, this does not really come from any textbook, what are the inherent attributes of a good leader. And then I would suggest a continuum. There are actually 20 points. If time permits, I'll run through those. There's a continuum as to, on one pole is a pure manager, and on the other hand would be a pure leader like Martin Luther King. And you can actually put across yourself and see where you stand in your own inherent individual style in being a manager or leader. Again, there are no value judgments that which is better. In one situation, you have to act purely in a managerial capacity, and there are others when you need to tilt more towards the leadership role. Friends, leadership is essentially a risky vocation. Whether you're fighting for the freedom of your country, whether you're fighting against racial discrimination, whether you're fighting poverty in the tribal areas of India or a backward border district like Gurdaspur, it is a risky, because failures can loom large. The odds are against you. But that is the beauty of the leadership and his followers, that they do realize that this is a value which is dear and not negotiable. And therefore, you, in spite of all the risks of failures and other concomitant risks, you go ahead. Similarly, a leader, as distinct from a manager, would be relying on intuition. A lot of data management processes, you can churn out the numbers, Excel sheets, projections, and so on. But when you have to take the final call, there is something intuitive, something subconscious, where you actually churn the numbers around, and all the advice from your advisors might be that, sir, it is far too risky, we may not succeed, let us wait for one more year. And you as the leader or the manager or the managing director or the manager of your little team, you may take a call, no, this is the time, if not now, when, if not us, who, and that indirectly gives you the first mover's advantage, which ultimately paves the way for your success. So similarly, a manager and a leader is not, this is my task, I do it. He's always trying to take the initiative that this I have done, but sir, can I also do A plus delta A and reach something extra within the same resources or some incrementally more resources? So taking initiative, of course, within the framework of your organization and organizational objectives, it is the hallmark of a good manager and a leader. And as has been said, this is an era of 24/7. That is what your companies, they want. That is what the way the world is functioning. Sometimes you're interacting with across the time zones. You may be getting up and the Pacific time is 11 and a half hours behind. Those people may be going to sleep. So this requires a lot of personal sacrifice. So if you want to be in management and leadership positions, this may be taken as given, requires a lot of sacrifice in terms of your personal health, in terms of your family time, in terms of your leisure time and your other interests. But this is what is required. And once you are getting into management education and leadership roles, you better know that this thing is going to happen. A leader has to be, a manager has to be courageous. He has to be fearless. This actually is a corollary from the fact that the leadership roles are risky. Now, let us not confuse between danger and fear. Danger is something very real. I mean, if you want to cross the road without paying heed to what the traffic which is coming from left and right, you're running into danger and you could be run over. In fact, it would be absolutely indiscriminate for you to say that, you know, I'm not going to be bothered because I'm fearless. So that is danger. Those are the risk factors that you have in your management scenario. Fine. But we hedge those risks, we tackle those risks. And then after that, it is then fearless. As Guru Gobind Singh said, Shubh karmante kab hu na taron. Once you know that this is the cause, the dear cause of your organization, then Shubh karmante kab hu na taron. The word is taron, not to flinch at that level. Once the decision has been taken, and go ahead into the implementation of the same. A leader is generally relying on faith and trust. He has given you instructions. If you want something in writing, he could give it to you. But unlike the bureaucratic systems and the managerial systems where everything has to be sanctioned in writing, likhit roop mein aayega. So that is there. A leadership says, once I have told you, you can take it, his word for it, built on faith and trust. And communication, of course, is the key. And communication generally, in terms of verbal communication, of course, written communication, and in this day age of COVID, communication over electronic media like the one, this is going to be very important in terms of speaking with each other and getting the message across. And there can be a whole 2-hour class on what communication is, but if there is one takeaway, the communication is not what is said at the mouth of the speaker, it is what is understood at the end of the receiver, the person who actually hears the message and interprets it. So if he is able to understand what you are trying to say and has that impact, the communication is perfect. Otherwise, there is not only discommunication, there can be distortion, and you can have results which are contrary. The other thing about good managers and leaders is having a change in paradigm. As I was talking about Dr. Dhingra, you don't say this is how things have been done in this organization since ages. In fact, Americans have a funny little way of saying it. You can't fix it if it ain't broke. And so why innovate? Chal to raha hai. In government, you go to a new post and wo kahe ji janab shuru to hi tha idda hi chal raha hai. So therefore, a leader and a manager has to challenge the reigning paradigm. There is a lot of resistance, I would say, because inherently human beings have a tendency for inertia. But if you are able to convince people, talk to them, sell the idea, tell them what are the advantages, and this is chiming with the core value of yourself as well as your organization, then I'm sure you would be able to, not only challenge but also change the reigning paradigm. And as I said, leadership doesn't require any formal titles. Wherever you're sitting, you can start exercising leadership. There is nothing like a leader. It is only an exercise of leadership. As they say, and a question which is often asked, are leaders born or are they made? I think just like any person is not a born doctor or a born manager, leadership can also be taught, and leadership and management can also be learned. So therefore, of course, William Shakespeare said in a different context, that some people are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. So some have leadership roles thrust upon them and they become leaders after that role is thrust. But if someone were to ask me a simple question whether leaders can be made or taught, the answer is yes. Leaders can be made, leadership can be taught, as long as you have the cardinal point of the shared value in front of you, which is also a point at this. I would like to talk about this core value. Our scriptures talk in terms of your swadharma. What is your ultimate purpose in life? I mean, it is not just a spiritual question, what do you want to do? It is also a plain, simple managerial question. There are companies, we were talking about Apple Incorporated. Companies know what they are doing. Fine. They're making mobile phones. How they are doing, of course, they know, they have the technical know-how, and that is the how of the company they also know. And the other is the why, which is generally a very difficult question and often unanswered as to why a company is existing in the first place. Why is your role as a manager existing in the first place? Why is a political party there in the first place? It is not what you're doing, but why. So as Steve Jobs would have liked to say, he said, I want to change the way the universe works. I want to change the way the people interact. Having a fancy phone, having a few other features. So the why and that core concept as to what is your innermost motivation, that should be a guiding type of a pole star in your personal. The Japanese have got a beautiful concept. It is not the subject of this talk, but it is called Ikigai, Ikigai. You can Google it and see for yourself. They talk in terms of concentric Venn diagrams, all intersecting at the center, something which you love doing, you're passionate about, something which you pays you for doing, something which is good for the world, and all those things at the center is something called an ikigai. So whether you can ultimately find that ikigai, which is good for the world, makes you a living, you're passionate about, and obviously you get a decent wage for it, those type of things one must and need to start thinking and talking about. Now, I will not really go through these 20 points in detail as to the poles on which the leadership and the management roles can be seen, but I can send later on a link of an article which I wrote on medium.com and you can go through it. But to quickly run through, generally management also in the corporate and bureaucratic concept based on mistrust, whereas a leader, it is based, the bedrock is based on faith and trust. A manager may look at the objectives of his own little unit, whereas a leader is looking at the whole organization. So a manager within a unit would say, okay, I'll grab the credit for this, but those 3 other units are going to be losers in the process, and overall my organization is going to be loser. So a manager who is having a leadership potential will not only talk in terms of his own little unit or his own section or his own division within a Ministry of Government of India, but look beyond overall and into the bigger pictures. Managers, and when I say managers, in my mind, bureaucrats often come. We are very good at apportioning the blame. Anything goes wrong, let us fix responsibility. Whereas, and hogging the credit when things go right. A manager really does the opposite. When things go wrong, he says, it was my call. I told my people to do it. I take the responsibility. I'm sorry I failed. My intentions were good. And also, when the mission is successful, it is not about I, me, myself. It is about, it is not about I, me, myself. It is about saying that my team actually did it. So these are the differences between a manager and a leader. Similarly, a manager would rely on penalties. ये नहीं होगा तो इसका एक increment काटा जाएगा. A manager would be relying, a leader, on incentives. You exceed your objectives, people are going to be rewarded. This is a fundamental change in the paradigm. One saying penalties and other talking in terms of incentives. Managerially, they could be the same, but if you see, the difference is that of the very concept. Manager is sticking to the call of the duty. A leader is going beyond the call of the duty. That is very important. The team members in a managerial team are his subordinates. A leader only has followers. Your team members as your subordinates, or they are followers, or at best your colleagues. That is something which you need to be constantly thinking and analyzing. A manager is relying on rules, procedures. A leader is relying on the mission, outcomes, and the output, and above all, the impact. You may have an output, you may have better educated people, but if they don't have the moral compass and inner GPS to lead them to the right values, that higher education may actually have gone in vain. So that is the impact, is very important when we talk in terms of leadership. A manager respects hierarchy. Assistant vice president, deputy vice president, and we respect. In any organization, there would be, even in a family, you have a concept of a hierarchy. But leadership, the hierarchy is nebulous, and the leader is able to pick up winners down the line from his followers who are able to deliver the goods. So that is what a good leadership is all about. Another interesting thing which you are familiar with, statistics, a bell curve manager may constitute 5% of the overall statistical distribution. You top 5% in the statistical distribution. But as far as the matter is concerned, it's kind of an outlier. Outside the, so there's some mic which is a strong echo is coming. Thank you. Then this is something very important. A manager is often stating, he's speaking. A leader is always listening, because some of the brightest ideas and some of the most important pitfalls would come if you listen to people. So it is not just about stating, here I'm the boss, this is what to be done, let's go and do it. That is a managerial perspective. A manager who's a leader has to listen, and listen very carefully. And this is another point which I think chimes very well, and it's one of my favorites, is a manager tries not to fail. It is like a cricket team which is trying to play for a draw, whereas a leader is trying to succeed. There is a lot of difference between a person who's trying not to fail conservatively on the defensively, and a leader who says that, this is our mission, come what may, do or die, we are going to achieve that. Then, of course, there is a top-down approach in management. There's a plan which has been given. I'm sorry, we can't change it. This is how it has come from the government of India, and this is how the panchayat is going to implement. A good leader would go actually and see what the Gram Panchayat is saying about this scheme. Does it chime into their local priorities or not? and then kind of filter it back and get it into the national plans. Listening and stating, a manager likes his own discourse, one-way communication. A leader would like an intercourse of ideas, people throwing ideas at him, brainstorming, ideation, and then of course reaching a consensus decision. A manager, as we said, we talked in terms of Jugaad. A manager is one who improvises, but a leader is person who innovates, and innovates is what is going to get you 10x, 100x, and exponential returns. The improvisation is only going to save a situation or give you incremental improvements. As managers, we value labels. Am I a joint secretary in a ministry or additional secretary? Whereas a leader is beyond labels. It is the mission and getting people and mass following to get the things done. And this is also very important. A manager sometimes doles out sympathy. Someone is unwell, okay, theek hai, chutti sanction kar di, you're sympathetic. A leader is empathetic. People don't want sympathy. Sometimes condescending sympathy may annoy a person. On the other hand, empathy of a leader is trying to put yourself into that position, almost feeling the hurt of the other person and saying, oh God, your father passed away, sad. That empathy, is there anything what I can or the company can do for you? Those are the type of things which distinguish, and ultimately the type of rewards which you get in terms of the involvement and motivation of your staff, your followers, your employees is phenomenal. And just to conclude on this part, we have relying on written communication. A leader generally communication is verbal, and a manager discourages dissent. फैसला हो गया यार, ऊपर से आया है, let's start doing it. Whereas a leader would encourage discussion. Now, having a consensus discussion approach, everything, but remember one thing, once a decision has been crystallized, whether you are a leader, whether you are a manager, all the consultative, brainstorming, getting ideas, feedbacks, external consultants, everything, well and good. But once the decision is taken, then each one, right from the top to the bottom, must be in sync with that decision. Then it is not the top management's decision, it's not my manager's decision, it is our decision, and then we have to work, irrespective of the fact that I had expressed a strong dissent or had strong reservations against a particular proposal. And normally then there should, of course, I am not saying that if the situation fundamentally changes, for instance, the COVID scenario or something happens in a global economy, like in 2008, you had a global economic meltdown, that I'm not going to revisit my decision. If something you had not considered or a change in paradigm or something cataclysmic has happened, do revisit those decisions. But once a decision has been taken, then let us go whole hog and try and take it to the logical conclusion, and then see whether it is working out or not. So this was, friends, which I wanted in the bulk of my talk to talk in terms of what a manager is, what a leader is, and they are not mutually exclusive. This is a continuum. You can, in your personal and professional life, take on leadership roles, and which was going to help you in your personal life as well, the professional life, and your impact, the results, the output is going to be many times more. That's my personal opinion. If you act in accordance with this particular set. Now, this really is the conclusion of the bulk of my talk. But as Dr. Dhingra had pointed out, that there are many lessons from our ancient scriptures, and more particularly the Bhagavad Gita, which coming from no greater teacher than Lord Krishna himself, and no better student than Arjun. He was a very evolved personality, and they had the facility of actually asking questions and answers in real time. So there are many lessons in management and leadership which we can derive from Bhagavad Gita, and these holy scriptures have so much to offer, and sometimes there are so many diverse interpretations which are thrown at us that sometimes the original, what is intended, is also sometimes lost. So with your permission, I'll take about 5 to 10 minutes to touch a few points before we can conclude and take on question answers, if any. Now, in the Administrative Service of India, the IAS, the motto, which was adopted in 1969, is just 3 Sanskrit words: Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. In fact, if you ask a normal IAS officer what the motto is, perhaps we would have long forgotten. And if you ask him what the meaning is, perhaps he would have to Google it and see. A number of educational institutions recently have also adopted this. So yoga is union. Of course, there are a number of interpretations of yoga, to connect your Atma with Paramatma, the union. But the literal translation, if you Google in Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam, which is part of the verse, chapter 2, verse number 50, Bhagavad Gita comprises just 700 verses in 18 chapters, whereas Mahabharata as a whole has, I think 1 lakh verses, which is 2 lakh lines. So this is really the distilled wisdom which is there in front of you. And half of that verse, Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. So the normal interpretation which we are given is unity is skill in action. So they say, what is Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam? Whatever you're doing, you're laying a brick, you're painting, you're a bureaucrat, you're a teacher, you're a student, you're a policeman, you're a soldier, whatever you are doing, do it with utmost skill. Kushalta se karo, jo bhi kar rahe ho. And raise it to a level not only of a craft, raise it to a level of an art. So that is one level of interpretation, that, doing this is itself yoga. Whatever you're doing, do so with absolutely in a way that it becomes a perfect art for yourself. But then someone said that there is, like in Punjab, you used to have Kulu ka bail, he's going round and round. In 19th century, slavery was legal in places like America, Europe, and UK also. Is the dharma and karma of a slave to go around meaninglessly and to be at the beck and call of his master? Is that what he should do, and say that this is my karma and this I must do very skillfully? So then scholars have level to say that Kaushalam is not about kushalta alone. It's not just skill. The Nazi journals acting and legally bound by orders of Hitler's may have been very skillful in eliminating, millions of people in concentration camps. But that is not covered by Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. You have to have Kaushalam is in the nature of discerning. Kaushal, not just Kushal. So are you having a discerning mind to take a decision? So are you applying your mind and seeing what is going to be the impact thereof? So therefore, as a manager, as a bureaucrat, as a teacher, as a student, as a householder, as a husband, as a wife, you will be in many positions where you will have to take this call. And you have to have a discerning mind. And discerning mind, you first think things through, and then comes the point of inflection, which is a decision, and then is action. So thinking, deciding, and action. And that decision has to be a discerning decision, which is, in my personal interpretation, and they're of course derived from the scholars, you have to have a discerning mind. Often from class 1 onwards, we are taught, please do your work. You're a student, study. You're a manager, do your work. You're a teacher, go and teach. And phal ki ichha mat karo. Fine, but that is half of the story. When we say phal ki ichha mat karo, it is in nature of your own personal dividends, because you should be focused on the job at hand. If there is a cricketer, people I'm of the old school and never went beyond the test cricket. If a person, a batsman, is constantly looking at the scoreboard, where has he reached, rather than focusing on the ball, obviously his performance on the cricket pitch is going to be anything but perfect. So therefore, one interpretation is that please focus on your job. You will automatically hit a century. That is one interpretation. The other interpretation, of course, is that when you say phal ki ichha mat karo, it is the nature of personal dividends. When you're doing a job, Dr. Dhingra is not saying whether the ministry is going to reward me with the best CMD in a public sector undertaking or not. He's totally focused on taking care of his stakeholders. So therefore, all the decisions that you take are to be discerning decisions. You don't have to bother about the phal ki ichha insofar as you're concerned, but your team members, your customers, everything, your discerning decisions are going to impact them. You don't say, I don't care what happens to my customers and what happens to my, because Gita ka gyan is that phal ki ichha mat karo. Phal ki ichha is only in the nature of your personal dividends and personal rewards. Everything else in a manager and leadership position, you are supposed to have discerning decisions to see what could be the potential impact. And of course, future is uncertain. There are so many things. Things may turn out in a way that you feel they had to or not. And that is all about doing your duty diligently and with focus. Now, I'm also conscious of the fact that SD College and Sanatan Dharam, as they call it, it's an ancient dharma. It's not religion in that sense. They said this is an ancient, if I may use the word, primordial code of conduct. Be truthful, be honest, don't hurt living beings and so on. That is the Sanatan Dharam. It transcends the normal classified religion. Follow that. But Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna talks in terms of your Swadharma. What is your duty at that particular point in time? Hey Arjun, you are a Kshatriya warrior and there is a battle to be fought on matter of principle. You were willing to settle for 5 villages, let alone the kingdom of Hastinapur, but you were denied that. Now it has become a matter of principle and prestige. Now, Sanatan Dharam may say, no injury to anyone. And Lord Krishna is talking in terms of your Swadharma. So what I basically am saying is that the Holy Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, they help you to address the decisions that you are going to face are not going to be like, Hindi movies, the baddies and goodies, the good and the bad, and the decision is very clear. Sometimes it is what is perhaps very legal but may not be ethical. There's something inside you which is telling you that there's something not right with it. When your chartered accountant and your lawyer is saying this, it's perfectly in accordance with the law of the land and there's nothing wrong with it. So those dilemmas, a decision which is the path of the good, may be difficult, and there is an easy or a pleasant, those type of dilemmas you have to then risk and reward scenario. So all these things as a manager, you will have to take decisions, postponing decisions, pushing files up to levels, and then trying to shirk responsibility. That is not the hallmark of a manager. We as human beings, we as citizens of the country, we as temporary tourists on this planet Earth will be required to take decisions, and those decisions have to ultimately chime with your inner self. And that chiming with the inner self is something which resonates from your internal GPS, will never lead you astray. And irrespective of whatever the legal people, etc., may be saying, I think there is no cost which is too high to abstain from doing a thing which you think is not something which is chiming well with you. And to conclude, because it started beautifully with the schemes that your society has overall, not only in the field of management education, but top quality, world-class management education, and you are lucky for that. That really brings me, I didn't want to touch upon this, to the last verse of Bhagavad Gita, And that somehow actually is befitting the organization and the ecosystem in which your college and the governing society is working. And those two lines, pardon me, I'm not a student of Sanskrit and my pronunciation may not be exact. In the concluding lines, this is Sanjay, the narrator, talking to the blind king Dhritarashtra. The king has asked at the end, what is happening now? What do you think? The Bhagavad Gita ends when the great battle is poised to begin. He said, hey Sanjay, what do you think is going to happen? So he said, Yatra Yogeshware Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanurdhare. He says that where you have Yogeshwar, the Lord of Yoga, Lord Krishna, mind you, not as a little toddler stealing makhan from his mother or in the Ras Leela with the gopis in Vrindavan, but the Lord of Yoga, the Lord of the universe, the very incarnation of Lord Vishnu, that Lord Krishna where you have, and along with that, Partho Dhanurdhare. Kunti Putra, Kunti's birth name was also Pritha. So Partho, Dhanurdhare, and Arjun not as a diffident Arjun or in his Agyatwas teaching dancing, but Arjun with bow and arrow poised for action. So where you have that enlightened management and those values, and Arjun like Dr. Dhigra poised for action, then what is to be expected? They say, Tatra Shri Vijayo. There you're bound to have Shri, plentifulness, prosperity, victory. Victory over what? Over disease, over illiteracy, over anything which is negative and for the welfare of the society. And Vijayo Bhutar Dhruva, prosperity, and Dhruva, stability, like the pole star. Mater Mama, he qualifies that in my opinion. So I'm happy that you have an enlightened management body which has those values, and a great executor, Dr. Dhingra, as director of this institute, and you all are members of this great team, great family, and please do make the best of it. You're all very lucky to be in this ecosystem. Your parents are able to afford. These 2 years are really going to be very crucial. And if you absorb things like a sponge, as was rightly said, that education can come from various directions. Mark Twain, in a different context, said, I didn't allow my schooling to interfere with my education. Here it actually means that your education goes beyond what is going to be taught in these classes. But ultimately, the parting word would be that whatever chimes with you, ultimately it is going to be your decision. No one is going to forgive you for saying, this was in the third semester class, someone told me like this and therefore I acted along with that. You are the person on the spot. Everything considered is your decision. Own it. And I'm sure, as Lord Krishna in the parting word, there shall be victory, and there you shall be able to overcome all odds. Thank you very much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.